Alright, last we left off, I've just finished cutting out the forms, and now we have to create a mean between the two. So this is pretty easy, and you might want to consider switching over to a more accurate pencil at this point, now that you're theoretically on some nice flat smooth cardboard. And we're just going to zip around them. We'll zip around this one, and then we'll overlay. And one of the checks to see how accurate your first attempt at this is, like how accurate these things actually are, is to compare the two top lengths. Because that's what you're going to do. You're going to literally go for the top here. You're going to literally align this one side here, and then align this side here, and then go over it. Wow, I've made a huge error in the toe. That's massive. But we can still use this. Just go around the two. And give it an inside mark, because I always forget. And there's absolutely no difference between the inside and outside. The difference between this line, they're spot on right here. There's about a millimetre here difference. It's spot on right here. There's a bit of discrepancy in the back. Tops are both spot on. The front of the cone is spot on. And the only place we have problems is at the vent. And yeah, this is a massive. This is me out of practice and doing this more for the camera and not spending enough time getting my center line on the toe right. Because that's probably the hardest one out of all the centers to get. So how do we fix this? Well, it's really easy. You just split the difference. All right. Halfway between and obviously with practice this discrepancy is going to reduce, and when you do the same last over and over again, you'll be able to understand more what it should look like, depending on the shape of the toe will cause these distortions to be different in every form that you take on every different last. Right. So once you've split the difference, you just join the dots. And again, I'm doing this very rough, very quick. You take a lot more time and, draw this out nicely and neatly. If you really want to make a real shoe pattern, just let your artist out, make it cool. And the same in the back here. As you can see, this is a lot more accurate, or there's a lot less discrepancy here, which is good. Makes it a lot easier. And I'll do the rest of the cleanup with my knife. Stand up again and get my head in the camera, because that's how I roll. So I can do this so you can see. And forget about left and right from here on in, simply because there's no difference. The difference is so negligible that's it's in the noise. Missed it. And there's a form left and right. Okay, so we then just trim that coat off a little bit. Okay, now we need to probably get your little pricker out and copy our pattern onto the form. No, let's not. I'll show you how to draw it out properly because that'll be more useful. So, get a nice new piece of cardboard. We'll split that. And let's talk about building a pattern. Alright, so in the previous step, we want to repeat. Right, this time we're going to give ourselves a bit more space so that we can add an allowance for lasting allowance. Well, the lasting allowance only needs to be about 2 centimeters, so that should be fine. I'll just put a ground line in there, and I don't have a right angle that I can use. One trick to quickly make a right angle is get a piece of paper, fold it, and then fold it again, and you can quickly create perfect right angle every time right here. And then it's just up to your hand to position it properly. That's a quick way to make a right angle if you don't have a square or a set T, stuff. Okay, so put our form, put our line, put our dude down here. We've still got our dividers set for back height, so we can whack that in. Lighting here is terrible. Can't see anything. Line up our form again. Throw it down here. Okay, I've moved it. Throw the form down. Because we've already made the correction here, we're going to line the form up, get our vamp line, get our back line, and get our feather line. Okay, hope you can all see that. So, a lasting allowance is about that. Honestly, can't remember. it's about 2 centimeters. It's a bit less. It's technically a bit less. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add that lasting allowance on so that it's there, and now I don't have to worry about it anymore. It's just there. And I can't see anything. So this is going to be as inaccurate as heck. This in frame at all? Yeah, I can. Oh, I can't see it. Oh, well. So, adding the lasting allowance. And then you're probably thinking, oh, you've still got to get the pattern on there. Alright, so line it up. Remembering that our top points are the accurate points in our form, which helps us vastly. We've already made the cutoff for the thing. So, honestly, I just get a pricker and I find the key points in this style. So if you're in the camera, line them up again. Alright, there we go. So, the key points in this style are the stay, the top line, and the quarter line. I'm going to throw the eyelets in. The rest I can freehand. Alright, so from here, if I use this, it's going to get stuck in there all the time, so I'm going to go back to my hideous pencil, because the ugly duckling is a beautiful tool, and you know, this is just dot to dot. Fill it in. Got the top line, got the eyelets, got the top line, which is a dead straight line if you recall, and then, where did we go? Down here, didn't we? So this is demonstration again, so it's rough as guts, not really too worried about copying it. If you want to get a more accurate result here, you can use a pinwheel to basically do the same thing, you just get more pins, and you rough your thing up, which makes it a bit difficult to draw on, which is why I tend not to do the pinwheel thing. You can obviously cut these pieces out physically and just go around them like we have the whole form, but then you've got this in. This is a better reference because you can see that I've pitched the last, and you know, it's more informative for a pattern cutter as far as I'm concerned. So we've transferred our thing. We've got our style here. We've got a heel counter that came down like this, right. And we've got the tongue that comes down like this. Try and keep this in frame so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, and then the vamp underlay again, which I drew on the last and the previous video. Alright, I'll just bring that in. Alright, and then we'll have to stay. And alright, this is the sort of thing I've seen other people demonstrate on videos on pattern cutting on YouTube. And it's right about here they start to go astray. because the toe and the heel, they're trying to work out what to do here by pulling apart other shoes, and they're not gleaming the tricks that they need to actually achieve what they're going for. And the trick is that if you rob from Peter, you have to give back to Paul. What the hell does that mean? For a single piece vamp like this, we cannot mirror this vamp shape over with this curve. We have to straighten this curve out. How do we do that? We're working on center lines, so this is a duplicate, so we need to find a good position for the center line. And because this is curved, you want to take the top off the heel and fill in the valley. Alright, so if you take a centimetre off here, you have a centimetre in here. And because leather stretches, you can play with that rule a little bit and break it a little bit. Alright, so this opening here, just looking at it looks really high. Just bring it down a little bit. Alright, so let's do this in a single piece with the tongue in it, because that's even harder. So the concept is called springing for the tongue, and you need to bisect, and by eye, I'm going to want to take off about this much of the toe and fill in about that much of the thing. And this is sort of difficult to explain, right? So if I have that as my center line and fold it out, we've basically got this is happening. However, from experience, I know that the leather's going to stretch a little bit and fill in this, right? So I'm going to add a little bit extra just to be safe, because the first pull is going to be experimental for the heel and for the toe. I'm not explaining this very well. Because the tongue has this relief, we can tighten this angle as if this part is not here, but we need to still allow for this to curve up when we last it down. So if I was making this as a one-piece vamp, I would actually, instead of pitching it far up here, which would be good for something like a more enclosed shoe, I'm going to pitch it as though the vamp ends here and then tack this on, so that because all this can just stretch. The stretch of the leather will allow for it, and I don't have to. So if I consider this point and I bring it down, that's going to give me, on both sides added together, about a centimetre less material in this valley, which is actually preferable, because when you end up with the vagaries of toe lasting and whatnot, it just doesn't look right now, so I'm just pushing it up. But I'm going to just move this theoretical line, just put it in where I think it should go, because I want it to sort of nestle in this area here, right? This area where the tongue is can spring and stretch. This area can be stretched and molded. All right, so we're trying to even all these funky things out so that they can be a pattern. And I'm going to go with that because I haven't done this in ages, and I'm pretty sure that'll work. And so the trick to get the tongue right is to take a measurement, so it's about 9.5 centimetres, and then just pivot that straight along that line and go 9.5 centimetres. Add a little bit more, so I'll make this, round this up to 10, And I'm adding a bit more because when the leather curls up, it's gonna contract a little bit. And then just basically copy this. And this is exactly the area that you will expect to adjust after your first pull of the pattern over the last. It might be short, it might be long, you know, and I always prefer to try and get them a bit long on the first pass, because then you can just trim it off. So that'll probably end up, I'll probably added about 1.5 centimetres in total. So that's 11 centimetres, and the actual tongue is about 9.5. So add a little bit extra just to make it good. Right. And then, as you can see, I'm just sort of shaping it back in here, and I'm not bringing this to a slot. You can technically put a slot in here, but it's not as good. If you can get a nice bit of a turn in here with a few millimeters, that's probably much better. So your tongue pattern will look like that. Alright, so the stitch line for the sponge comes down about here. So a similar sort of trading of angles that we did on the vamp, we're going to do on the back. And this is an area. These are both areas that you should spend some time on. And I've got to remember how to do this. So first you should add a little bit, because the material, the leather, the sponge, the lining, whatever you can put in here, and for this shoe, I'm imagining it's got a leather upper with a piece of stuffed sponge in here and a bag line top with some thin textile. So, you know, your basic cheap, nasty $20 school shoe. So to achieve that, first thing is, you're not going to follow the last, whatever you do, alright? With a school shoe, if you put, this pattern so far is one piece, so what I would do if I was going to actually make this as a real shoe, is the same thing. I'd extend the top line a little bit, just a few mil, so that it doesn't dig into the ankle at this point. But very quickly come back down to the last, back onto the last, like this, you know. And this is sort of what we want the back shape to look like. And so you can, if you want to make this one piece, you can just pick your top point and chop it off a little bit. And for this one, I'd probably chop it off there, right? So that'd be your line of your center line, and you'd have to put a large V, which would almost correspond to where the last is here, but you'd probably add an allowance. No, because this would be one piece, so there'd be no allowance. But anyway, there's a lot of complicated things you could do here. If you're a beginner, you probably want to put a back strap in here, so that you don't have to do this here, and you can learn a different technique here. And the different technique is to put a zigzag stitch or a close stitch, and have a back strap over the top of it. I think for this one, we'll put a back strap in there, just really simple. Strap this, just so I don't, because this is otherwise very similar to what we're going to do up here. So I'll show you how to do this with a backstrap and a close seam. Alright, so a close seam, because we're actually putting it on the sewing machine, we can put this shape in the pattern, and that's what you should do. The one thing you should allow for is the ultimate thickness of the heel counter and the leather, right? And this is probably close, maybe a bit tight, depends on how thick your materials are. You're using big, thick, like 4mm leather, then add 4mm in here. If you're using something really thin and stretchy that compresses to almost nothing, then add almost nothing in here. Add just the thickness of, say, the upper material. The leather would be the thicker thing, so 2mm for the leather, 1.5mm, whatever your gauge is. So let's consider this as a school shoe, so it's got a standard gauge of leather, so this line will do fine. You put about 2mm on for a seam, which is so easy you can do now. Again, this is not accurate. I've spent no time on making this accurate. You will spend much more time, so will I, if I want to make a proper shoe from this, but demonstrate. And that's about it. Alright. The other thing to consider is the lining. Now, with the shoes we used to make in a typical school shoe, you'd have a bag line that comes out here, which means you have to add a couple of mil. Can be as much as 5mm, depending on your machining setups and whatnot, materials again. But yeah, it could be as little as 2mm. It depends how good you are. But generally, being a little bit generous here is better. And then the lining, so that'll be an allowance for on the quarter and the same allowance on the lining. But the lining in the front will be different. The lining will have a trim off, about 5mm all the way around, and then we'll bring it into the stay, and then from the stay we bring it into this slot, alright? And then from the slot in the lining we have another slot, again with a round, not a pointed thing here. The round thing does double duty. Not only does it prevent point force from building up in this area, but it distributes the transition of this material from the upper to the lower portion of the shoe without bulking up and creating a high spot, which will be very uncomfortable when you put the shoe on. And then bring your lining straight down and give it a generous allowance, because lining is cheap, plus the sort of straighter you can have this, it just works better in the making and whatnot. And your lining, you don't want your lining to be the same length as your upper, alright? You want your lining to split the difference between the upper and the last, so it should come literally halfway, alright? And in the back, whereas we have put our back line on the outside of the last, for the lining, we need to put the lining, because we're not going to do anything special here, there's just a fold, alright? We have to angle our lining way back, like this, to put a pocket in there, alright? And if you're not going to put a seam in there, and you don't want to put stuff in there, then you should, again, start at the top, align your ruler, and then look at the bottom and find a spot just underneath the last. And about 1 centimetre was, well, it's sort of what I remember, so I'm going with that because I'm presuming I remember correctly. It's probably totally wrong. But again, all this malarkey, you should expect to adjust after you pull your first prototype of this pattern, which we'll talk about later, because you'll almost never get it right. Even an experienced pattern cutter we'll pull a new pattern of